Morning, everybody. Happy hump day. And welcome to the news agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined, who's gone to my other side today. How peculiar. And it feels odd like this. By the Mirror's political editor, John Stevens. Morning, John.
Hey, morning, Susie.
I feel like I've moved to the right. What's happened? Now, this is the People's Pay-Per-View, so get into the comments, ask us your questions. We'll do our best to answer them for you. Those of you listening later on podcast will just have to declare yourself a safe space and see if that works. So what have we got for you today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on a follow-up to its front page story yesterday, finally identifying the main suspect in the murder of BBC presenter Jill Dando 25 years ago. Now, we have a full exclusive video on our investigation on the Mirror YouTube channel. There's a link in the comments, so I recommend going to have a quick look at that for a few minutes if you want to get a full background. If you didn't see the coverage yesterday, you can always look up yesterday's stories. The paper was full of it, because now a witness has come forward to confirm that the man in the mirror is, they think, the same man they saw running away from the murder scene at the time and who police never found. Now, John, can you recap this a bit for us? Because it was 1999, these events. Who was Jill? Why the fact that she was murdered, and why was her killer never found?
Yeah, so it's 25 years ago this week. The anniversary is actually on Friday. When Jill Dando was killed, she was one of the most famous TV presenters in this country. She presented BBC News. She presented Crime Watch. She presented the holiday programme. Remember that used to be on TV? And so she was this huge star. And then she was shot on her front doorstep in Fulham in West London in April 1999. And there was a big police investigation. At one point, they did prosecute a man called Barry George. He was jailed. He was given a life sentence. But then several years later, some of the evidence that had been used to do with gun residue was found not to be accurate. And so he was actually acquitted and released. And so Jill Dando's family's never properly got justice, or they've never got justice at all, because the killer hasn't been found and locked up. And this investigation by the Mirror has been going back through loads of the old evidence. And one of the things they've been looking at is CCTV footage from Putney Underground Station, which was taken quite soon after the shooting. And witnesses talked at the time about how there was a sweating man seen running away from the scene of the crime. And this CCTV footage from Putney Station showed a man who matched some of the description of the guy who'd been seen running away. And so what the Mirror's done is they've taken this, they've looked at it with facial recognition experts, and they have suggested that there are likenesses between the man in this CCTV from Putney Underground Station and a Serbian hitman who, I'm going to struggle to say this name, but I'll give it a go, Milorad Ulamek. I should have just said it confidently, and then you'd presume that was the right Serbian.
You'd have known you had it absolutely pat then.
You'd have just thought, wow, he's so fluent in everything. And so now the pressure is on the police to look at, did they look at this properly at the time? And are they going to look at this again now? And the investigation's never been properly closed, but I think there's some quotes in the paper today from the Metropolitan Police. I think they talk about it being inactive. So basically, they've not fully shut it down, but they're not doing anything. And the woman who's quoted in the paper today is one of the people who was the witnesses who said that she saw the sweating man running away from the scene. And there's some quotes from her in the paper, and she's just shocked at the likeness between this Serbian hitman and the man that she says she saw running away from the scene. I wish I'd written down the quotes, but she was just saying...
She sounds like she's had one look at the paper and then rung in. Ring-ins used to happen all the time, readers. They don't happen anymore. But she's immediately ringing, oh my God, that's him. She's just like, immediately gone, yes, that's the chap I saw. And she's saying, I'm very good with faces. I can remember faces from decades ago. That is the guy I saw. And obviously the Mirror yesterday was using photographs of Ulamek back in the day. Now, the fact that this is a Serbian hitman is kind of, makes a doorstep murder kind of makes it extra dramatic in a way. But one of the things that made Jill's murder stand out was that she wasn't just shot by a passerby or something. She she seemed to have been executed with a bullet in the back of the head, pinned down to her doorstep as she was coming home. Now, what do you think, viewers? Do you think this matters? This is a murder from 25 years ago. Although her family and so on obviously haven't had answers, the shock in the country has moved on. The police tried to investigate. They made a bit of a mess of it. Does it matter? Do we need to look into this again? I'll declare an interest because I interviewed Barry George's mum about 1 million years ago for the Sunday Mirror, which was the first interview she gave after he was arrested or after he was convicted. And he was an incredibly troubled man, not terribly competent, I suppose, socially competent, I suppose is the best way to describe it. And there was no way, really, we came out of that interview thinking there's no way he could possibly have done something so cold-blooded and clinical and that would have required some thought as well. It was beyond him. But nevertheless, the police sort of persisted with saying that it must be Barry George, and it went all the way through to trial, and then he was eventually convicted. Now, Steve McMurran says, has a motive been suggested? Is there any suggestion the Serbian government had a role? Yes, Steve. So, John, can you explain this to us? Why would a Serbian hitman, my God, come all the way to London to kill the presenter of a BBC holiday programme?
Yeah, so there was loads of talk about this at the time, and there was US and British forces had conducted a bombing on a building in Belgrade. I think it was on a TV station. And there were anonymous calls to the BBC at the time. I'm just checking my screen to make sure I get this right. There were calls at the time to BBC Television Centre with basically them saying, you killed 16 people, we've killed one, there's 15 to go, which sounds like this is at the time of the killing of Jill Dando, which sounds like someone suggesting we are taking responsibility for this, that this has been done as revenge for this bombing in Serbia. So there's been loads of talk about Serbia all along. So that's why it's not just random that they've used this facial recognition and it's come up with a Serbian hitman. It would fit with some of the things that people have been talking about for the last few years.
Yeah, so it was mentioned at the time, and it's partly to do with the style of the killing. It seemed like there was someone who's a professional behind it. Also, Jill had been doing some appeals for Kosovan refugees, and that was quite high profile. She was super high profile. She was, there isn't an equivalent really today, I think, but she was very, very well known. Fiona Bruce, right? It's like that happened to her. But the main thing, when I read this, I always thought the Serbian hitman thing, I'll be honest, was a bit of a reach because, well, yes, but why? What? Are they mad? Kind of thing. But that Milosevic had taken personally against her in some way. That was always the suggestion. But when I read this stuff in the Mirror yesterday, it revealed that Ulamek, who is serving a 40-year sentence in a Serbian jail at the moment for assassinations, one of which was a journalist who was pinned to the floor, their own front doorstep, outside the front door, and executed in the back of the head. I mean, the MO is absolutely astonishingly similar. And, of all the times that journalists get attacked or resulting in physical violence, doorstep executions are very, very rare. For there to be two, you'd think that maybe it is the same person behind it. Now, this is the kind of case, I suppose, like you say, it's inactive at the moment. It only really gets restarted when resources get allocated to it, and that happens for political reasons, for publicity reasons, because suddenly someone's looking bad and they need to do it. Do you think that the PM or the Home Secretary has this on their desk and is thinking about doing just that? I mean, it's not like it's going to be hard to find this guy. He's in Clink, and you can find out if he's in the country at the time quite easily, you'd have thought.
Yeah, I think there will be pressure on the government. I mean, yesterday at Number 10 do these twice daily lobby briefings for political journalists. It was asked about that then, and the PM spokeswoman said that obviously Rishi Sunak would be very pleased if someone was brought to justice for this, and he feels for the family at this difficult time, especially as we're coming up to the 25th anniversary. But that's not a kind of proper... That's some warm words, but isn't a real proper commitment. I think that there will be pressure on the police to look at this. And this Mirror investigation's obviously come along. But remember, there was also, I don't know if you've seen it, there was a program on Netflix last year that was going back through all the evidence as well. They interviewed Barry George. That was like a really good series as well. That you think if the Met did manage to, I mean, the Met have got a lot of bad press at the moment for many different reasons and many mistakes they've made. Some of it fair, some of it slightly unfair, but their like prime job is keeping us safe and solving crime. And if they were able to get a successful prosecution all these years later on a big case like this, then it would be a massive good thing for them as a body at this time when they're facing loads of criticism. So I think if there's any chance that any of these details, any of these new bits of evidence could lead to new lines of inquiry that could possibly lead to someone being prosecuted for the murder of Jill Dando 25 years later, then I think that would definitely be a good thing.
Yeah, I think there would be an appetite for a good win there if one could be found. But, you know, the Met did screw up in some way over this. They got completely derailed by looking at Barry George when they shouldn't have done. And do you get the impression, I mean, looking at the Mirror's coverage today and yesterday, which talks about the CCTV of this suspect, it matches this guy up. We've found some facial recognition expert who's been able to say it. We've found a witness who says, yes, that's him. This is all stuff the police could and should be doing. Perhaps they did. Perhaps they could have put these pieces together a bit sooner. Do you get any sense, perhaps, that they may have known about Ulamek at some point and decided never to follow that line of inquiry? I mean, there was lots of politics going on at the time. You know, Blair was still in power. There was a war in Kosovo. Maybe there was more than just incompetence that meant they didn't chase this up at the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's a possibility. I mean, realistically, I don't know the answer to that question. But I think that one thing we can say is that quite often with police investigations, they can get kind of down one rabbit hole. They can get sidetracked because they are so desperate to get a result. They're so desperate that someone is brought to justice. And I guess in this case, that many of them were convinced that Barry George was the killer. And so they were very much looking at any evidence that kind of pointed towards him, and anything that didn't quite fit with that theory. You can see why in the kind of prioritization with stuff, they may have thought, well, it doesn't quite fit with what we think happened. So they may have kind of left it on the side. But now is obviously pressure on them to properly look at this and think, are there any leads in there that we didn't look at properly at the time that could now lead to something?
Yeah, maybe that will get sorted out. We'll have to see, won't we, as things progress with that. I'm sure that's a story that isn't going to be going away. But media pressure on the police does often lead them to make bad decisions. Jill Dando, Maddie McCann, Joanna Yates. It's happened time and time and time again. Now, we need to get on to the main story of the day. And yesterday, MPs voted to bring the Rwanda Bill into law, which would enable the government to deport any migrants who arrived on a small boat in the Channel to this Central African country, which the government has ruled safe when lots of people think it isn't. There was a huge amount of argument about that in Parliament. Now, as they were voting, there were horrible scenes in France where people traffickers, armed with sticks, beat back French police on the beaches to get migrants into overloaded boats, which then drifted off. Some people were trampled inside those boats. Others fell overboard. Among them was an unnamed 7-year-old girl who drowned. Now, John, there were arguments in the Commons about that is deaths like this, which the bill aims to stop, that it is humanitarian in its aims, and it is kindness. It's a way to save lives. In your conversations with MPs about this, is that their genuine belief that the Rwanda Bill is a humanitarian act, or are they voting on more ideological or party grounds, or because they just don't like migrants?
Well, I think we can all see what the problem is, that we've got thousands of people crossing the Channel, and whatever your opinion is, wherever you stand on the debate, I think everyone agrees that people making that dangerous crossing and risking their lives is absolutely dreadful. And you look at what happened yesterday, 5 people died in the Channel. One of them was a 7-year-old girl. There's quotes in the paper today from charity workers who saw the dad of this 7-year-old girl after she drowned in the Channel, and talking about how it'd been absolutely traumatizing and catastrophic for him to see his own daughter die in front of his eyes. So there is a massive problem here, and the numbers at the moment are going up again. So the government did have some success last year in bringing the numbers down slightly. If you listen to Rishi Sunak, whenever he was out and about publicly, he would be talking about how the numbers who'd crossed the channel were down by a third. But you look at the numbers for this year so far, and they're actually going up again. So in the first few months of this year so far, we've had 6,000 people made the crossing, and that compares to about 5,000 people in those same months last year. So the numbers are going up. There is great pressure. And I guess the question is this Rwanda scheme going to have any impact in stopping people making that journey? And so the people who support the bill, the government, say, well, this will act as a great deterrent. If people think if I cross the channel, there is a chance that I will end up on a one-way plane to Rwanda, that I might risk my life going to the UK, but there's no point because I'll just end up in Rwanda, then they think that will act as a deterrent and bring the numbers down. But you speak to other MPs and they say, well, look at the risks that these people are willing to take. If you are willing to risk your life to cross the channel, and you think there is a good chance that these boats could capsize, we see the numbers about people willing to risk their life. If you're willing to make that risk, then surely the risk that, well, there's a chance that X percentage of people might end up on a plane to Rwanda, is that really going to put people off when they're already willing to risk their lives to make this journey? And I think that would be the tricky thing. I mean, you have seen it in other parts of the world that these deterrents have worked. We had the problem, remember, I don't know what year it was it 2016 when we had the problem of loads of people crossing between Turkey and Greece and people losing their lives then, and the EU did a deal with Turkey, and it was about kind of creating space in camps for refugees in Turkey, and saying that people who made the journey into Greece would just automatically get returned to Turkey to stop people being willing to make the journey. So I think it is possible that it does have some effect, but I think that some people are so desperate to come here, that they're so desperate to make a new life here, that they are still going to be willing to make that journey. And the question is how many people are actually going to get sent to Rwanda. I think that will make a big difference to whether this is a deterrent or not. So you had ministers yesterday, the illegal immigration minister, Michael Tomlinson, out on the radio, and he was asked, well, these planes you're going to start sending to Rwanda, how many people are actually going to be on them? And he was suggesting, well, it might not be very many people on them at all. There's certainly going to be full planes going. So if you just have the government send a few planes and people think, well, actually, if I look at the percentage chance of being sent to Rwanda, it's still quite slim, then I think that people will start making the journey. As you say, summer is coming. We know when the weather gets warmer, people do increasingly make these journeys. And I think there's a lot of people in government worried about that the numbers are going to continue to tick up again.
And Mike says people who've risked their lives crossing the channel won't give a second's consideration to the tiny chance of being shipped to Rwanda. And if they do get sent, they'll simply set off for the UK again. These people are desperate and government doesn't care one bit. One of the things I think that Parliament perhaps has lost sight of is that if you are in that situation, you've travelled perhaps already across the Med, but certainly across Europe, and you're living perhaps under canvas and not having a terribly wonderful time of it, and maybe you've even got your children with you, the decisions you're making are not rational. They're not the same kind of decisions you make sat on a green bench in the House of Commons, where you are thinking, well, if someone has seen on the BBC that they're going to go to Rwanda, then they surely won't get on the boat, because the judgments and their parameters are just entirely different. And they wouldn't make the same choices that they might do if they were in a safer environment when they made the choice. And of course, you've got a people trafficker who's right in front of you going, yeah, it's okay, don't worry about the Rwanda thing. Only 1% is going to go, so I'll still get you across, and we'll drop you somewhere else or something. It's still going to happen to some extent. But what do you think, everybody? How would you vote if you were in the House of Commons, or the House of Lords for that matter, and this bill was coming through? Would you vote for it to say Rwanda's a safe country and that these people can go? Do you think it's the way to fix the people trafficking problem? Or is there something else that can be done? Is it kinder to stop these boats or give migrants a safe passage, really? There's no one in this country whose ancestors didn't arrive on a boat, usually from the continent. So charities and faith leaders have criticised the whole plan. It's expected there will be some legal challenges, but our colleague Jason Beattie in the explainer box in the story today says it's just not going to work, that it won't deter the people traffickers. So what are the alternatives, John? What else could be done?
So the thing that people talk about, and Labour talk about this a lot, is how do you improve border security? So we know that a lot of money has already been given to the French to improve patrols on French beaches to stop people starting off on these boats. Could you do more on that? Could you do more on intelligence sharing? So kind of cracking the people smugglers gangs by working out where exactly are they coming from? How is the money flowing? And as you say, there is a problem with, fine, you can say that people get sent to Rwanda, but people, even if that is a chance, even if that was a realistic prospect, these people will be lied to by the people smugglers. It's in their interest. They're trying to sell something. They're trying to sell people tickets, well, not exactly tickets, but they're trying to sell people, get their money to get them on these boats to make that dangerous crossing. They are determined to do that. And I guess that one of the ways to stop that would be to get to the root of the problem by smashing these gangs. But that's much easier for politicians to say in speeches, I'm going to smash the gangs, I'm going to take action, than to actually do that in practice. And we know that the government has been trying to do some of that over the last few years and so far hasn't been particularly successful.
No. JC says, and he's pointed out sort of a contradiction here. JC says, how is Rwanda even worse than death to be considered a deterrent? You've got a point, JC, because if it's a safe country, surely there are going to be some migrants who say, a free flight to Rwanda, thank you very much. I'll take that. Let me get on this boat and risk my life. I might well end up in Kigali. Thank you. If it is that safe and it is that wonderful, we could be paying an awful lot of money to send people somewhere else. And, it's turning out to be very expensive. Richard on Twitter says the Rwanda scheme is horrendous. It's about as unlikely to do anything different to targeting the traffickers or rubber boat factories, which also seems futile. Will restoring overseas aid be the best? And James writes in to say that Rwanda needs the migrants to replace everyone it lost in the genocide. That is James Cleverly, the Home Secretary, speaking there. Linda says, France doesn't care. When has it ever? Now, the cost of this is already very, very high. It's maybe £1 million a migrant. So far, I think it's about 300 or so that's expected to go in the first batch, if it ever does. Of course, if it achieves an end to this trade, then hooray, money well spent. But if it doesn't, what a shocking waste. And it's got to be said, Rishi didn't pledge to send people to Rwanda, did he, John? He pledged to stop the boats. And they are, at the moment, still coming. They dropped last year, I think, as a deal with Albania. So the Albanian numbers kind of dropped down. But now we've got Vietnamese numbers going up because of something that's happened in Europe. And so it's always going to be there, isn't it? And he pledged to stop the boats. And even if he gets a Rwanda flight off, if the boats still come, he's failed, hasn't he?
Yeah, and we are talking about huge sums of money in this case. I can't remember how much has gone to Rwandan government so far. But we're talking about hundreds of millions of pounds. It looks like we're going to spend probably £500 million on this pretty soon. And so these are large sums of money that to spend all that money, the government needs to show it is working. But there are also loads of questions for Labour as well that what happens if this scheme does work? If we suddenly see a massive drop in numbers, if they get a few flights in the air and you do see the numbers come down dramatically, Labour have said that it's a really costly gimmick, that it's not going to work. But if it did work, I think that there would be questions to the Labour Party on, are you really going to get rid of it? Exactly. If you think that it is working, if the numbers are going down, are you really going to go back to, I feel like I'm talking points here. Are you really going to go back to square one and thinking, is there another way to do this? But you speak to Labour people and they are just convinced that this isn't going to work as a deterrent and that is not going to be a problem they face, that they just think this scheme is flawed. And actually, you listen to some of the hardline right wingers, you listen to people like Suella Braverman, who obviously used to be Home Secretary, Robert Jenrick, who was Immigration Minister, who seems to be radicalised during his time in the Home Office. Used to be quite mild-mannered and moderate.
He's still on a prevent scheme, does he?
Anymore, has been on some sort of incredible political journey. And you listen to them and they're convinced that the Rwanda Bill isn't going to work either. So you've got both sides of the argument here saying to Rishi Sunak that this plan just has got so many flaws in it that actually in reality it's not going to do what it needs to do.
No, but it's kind of interesting that maybe there's someone in the Labour Party having the occasional 2 a.m. nightmare where they go, oh my God, what if it works? How do we reverse this ferret? We'll be absolutely stuffed. Now, before we go on to the good news of the day, I want to talk very briefly about the fact that Angela Rayner will be doing Prime Minister's Questions today at 12 o'clock, which will be carried live on these channels. And she's expected to get quite a drubbing over the Council House scandal, which the Tories have been stoking and will not let drop. Now, if you've been living under a rock, Rayner is accused of maybe not paying up to £3,000 capital gains tax on the sale of a house that she bought under the council right to buy scheme many years ago before she became an MP. But it's worth pointing out she has been accused of that by a billionaire peer who lives in Belize and a newspaper magnate who lives in France for tax reasons. So there is a huge disproportionate amount of tax that may or may not be where it should be. And she's facing a ruling party, of course, that's been chock full of tax avoidance scandals, including the Prime Minister's wife, Nadine Zahawi. We could list them all. So she's been biting her lip up to now, hasn't she, really, John? She hasn't. Angela is a very upfront, very sort of fairly blunt person, and I would have thought she would have pointed some of this stuff out. I would have thought her colleagues would have done as well, but it's still rumbled on, and she and the rest of the team have kind of been biting their lip a bit to not say the word misogyny, sexism, hypocrisy, things like that. She didn't want to turn it into some kind of pub fight, but is that going to hold today? She's going to be facing Oliver Dowden, who's sometimes a bit gentler than Rishi Sunak. Is she going to finally let rip, do you think? I mean, she's obviously going to get a hell of a going over if she doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly going to be a big thing at PMQs, or do we call it DPMQs when it's the deputies? But clearly anyone can see it's not going to be a surprise that it comes up, that both sides are clearly going to be preparing what they say. Oliver Dowden used to prepare David Cameron for Prime Minister's Questions. He is someone who'll no doubt have come up with some witty jokes that actually aren't that witty, that maybe when it gets delivered are just a bit embarrassing and awkward. Clearly, Angela Rayner's been practicing. She'll have her lines ready. I mean, it could be really, I mean, I imagine it'll be fiery. All the backbenchers will be loud. I imagine Labour and the Tories will be quite loud. Actually, last week at PMQs, the first one back after Easter, when Rishi Sunak made a joke about it, the Tory MPs were so loud. And sometimes on TV, you don't quite get how loud it is, because in the chamber, on TV, you watch it and you can hear everyone speak quite loudly, quite well. It's all very clear. And you think, why are they stopping? Because it can be heard perfectly. But when we're in the chamber, it can be so loud. And last week, when Rishi Sunak made that joke about Angela Rayner, it was so loud from the Tory side. They were absolutely delighted, like it was the funniest thing they'd heard in their lives. So I'm sure you'll get bits of that today, but there is a chance that it's all a bit too overthought and a bit too practiced and staged. Let's see. It could be a big moment, or it could just be a bit weird and awkward and embarrassing for everyone. Let's see.
Yeah, it can be very cacophonous, can't it, when you're actually in the chamber in person? It's like being in a barn with a group of people who've been very drunk for quite a long time on all sides, particularly the SNP, though. But of course, they've got these microphones, haven't they, at different stages down the chamber. So I suppose they can turn one up or one down when the Prime Minister's speaking, and they drown out some of the cheers around you. But I do think sometimes maybe they should just have just one microphone, and then you'd know how bad it was in there. People would see what they're actually really like, which is pretty bizarre behaviour, some of it. Anyway, we'll have to see later on. She's up at 12 o'clock. If you want to see her either give Oliver Dowden a pasting or get a pasting yourself, or just learn how bad Oliver Dowden's jokes are, then come and tune in and see that. Now, we have managed to find some good news for you in the world, and here it is. That was that. Gremlins today. Now, it's nice to find something that you've forgotten in the loft, but how about finding something that's worth maybe £647,000? That's what happened to one Home Counties couple who cleared out the attic, found an old guitar in a case, and presumably thinking there may have been a previous person at the house who lived at that address that may have been interesting. They had it checked out by experts. It turns out this was a 12-string once owned by John Lennon, who played it on the album Help, and it is now up for auction for more than £500,000. John, is this proof that we should all be hunting through? I'm going up to mine now. We should all be hunting through our lofts in the hope someone has left us something absolutely amazing.
I just through that door and then go to the other side. It's like my attic room, which is just, you can hardly move in there. You open the door and there's stuff pouring out.
Has a beetle ever been in there?
It's just my junk that I've accumulated over the last few years and loads of bits of tat I just need to get rid of, and old phone chargers from God knows when. So, no, sadly, there is nothing like that. But there's a quote in the piece saying I think it's the head of the auction house, he's obviously doing his best to sell this and make it seem like a huge thing, which clearly it is. I mean, £647,000, load of money. But he says it's like finding a Picasso or a Rembrandt. Plays like a dream. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say that. I mean, I'd just take the money, but I think I'd rather find a Picasso than some old guitar in my loft. But I'd take
I bet it must be out of tune by now, one would have thought. They've had to sort of tighten the strings a bit. But I think it's a rather wonderful find. And like you say, most of us are just going to have old junk and crap in our lofts. But maybe in 50 years' time, someone will come along and find our junk, John, and go, oh my God, the Nokia charger from 2002. Can you imagine? And suddenly your descendants will be wealthy. It's all possible, isn't it? Anyway, thank you very much for taking us through all that. Thank you, everyone, for taking part. If you want to see Angela Rayner, come back to these channels at 12 o'clock. Otherwise, we will see you again on Monday next week for another edition of the News Agenda. Till then, everybody, stay safe, and we'll see you on the other side. Tatty bye.